Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, Classic Non-Classics. This is episode number 2202 and Doubleshot number 2096. I got two trades to feature Wolverine. First up is a classic Wolverine storyline that is recommended for anybody who loves Wolverine. If you're curious one of his parts of his history, check this book out. Rob Liefeld recommends it because the story is really good. Windsor-Smith, who is the writer of the storyline, liked working on the story. There's some negative aspects I will explain in a minute, but here we have Wolverine Weapon X. Yes, this trade here collects the classic storyline that was published from a feature in Marvel Comics Presents issues 72 to 84, Wolverine 166, and Uncanny X-Men 205. Well, as for Uncanny X, Wolverine 166, it's not the full story. It's more like the flashback takes place during the storyline. And you could say that the 205 is like the epilogue. It's a 13-part story exploring Wolverine, how he got the way he is. Well, how should I put this? Basically, how he got the metal in his body. Because it was established in a later retcon that he was actually born with claws. Now, the way it's been depicted prior to Origin, which I believe was done by Bill Jemas, if I'm not mistaken, who wrote that original miniseries. In that particular storyline, by the way, that was also used for a loose adaptation for it. They adapted it for the opening sequence of X-Men vs. Wolverine. Yep. And this, now, in that particular story, they retconned it where Wolverine, because the only mutant power he had was a healing factor. That was it. That was the only thing that's been established about his character for a long time. The retractable claws, at first, when he first showed up, they were removable. And then later on it became retractable thanks to Lean Wee when he popped up in X-Men, because in his debut, they were removable. Probably it's just simple retcon. It's not really explained why it's like that for why it was retcon later. In fact, here's the sad thing. I can't meet Lean Ween to basically discuss that particular thing because the guy passed away 5 years ago. So it is impossible. He passed away 5 years ago and that's become October. Now, there are some things about this particular storyline Barry Wilson didn't like. The fact that people were copying him in their own books. He hated the fact, now if I heard he loved work on the story, he just didn't like the fact people were basically looking over his own work and using it for their own. He didn't like that concept at all. Now, Wolverine Weapon X, basically, you know Wolverine Weapon X program, this is basically where we got the information from. This story has been adapted loosely a few times over the years. Excuse me, I believe the first time it was ever adapted, this storyline, that I could think of was a flashback sequence X2, X-Men United, and then they adapted a little bit of this more in X-Men vs. Wolverine, except in that one he was a volunteer for the program, while other depictions where he was forced into the program, he was basically kidnapped. Now, the healing factor thing, that was basically part of his body. That was just like how Deadpool was getting a healing factor, but that messed up. Wolverine's basically makes normal. The claw thing, that was now according to the story here, the claws were a byproduct of the Weapon X program, though later retconned to be the Weapons Plus program. And also the fact that Captain America was the original Weapon 1. Yep. Marvel's, now, that particular thing is fine, you're expanding upon. Now, this storyline in particular, aside from the claw thing, here's the thing about the storyline that I should point out. This storyline hasn't had any retconning of it per se. There have been additions to the storyline, like characters say they were there when this thing happened. Like, I believe when Jeff Loeb, when he did, I think it wasn't Jeff Loeb, it was the guy who created Romulus. I think it may have been Jeff Loeb. Where it was said was a retcon that Romulus was actually here during the events of this particular story. Okay, adding somebody there, that's perfectly fine. But as far as I can tell, Marvel has left this story mostly been untouched over the years. There's never any removals of anything really controversial. Now, I should probably, this is the deluxe edition for this particular trade that collects the storyline. Which what Barry Windsor-Smith just does. He does the story here. He also does the story artwork for Uncanny X-Men #6. He also does the coloring too for that one. The co-writer for the Wolverine 205, actually Wolverine 160 does the artwork for that one. For 205, he does the writing, artwork, and coloring for that book. Chris Claremont does he co-does that one. Frank Tieri does the story for Wolverine 166. Now, if you're curious what the covers look like, they actually do have a page in here that has all the covers for this particular story. Of course, they also included, like, the reason why this is the Deluxe edition, because they included unused sketches that apparently Barry Windsor was going to use in this particular story, were rejected for some reason, not sure why. But, now here's basically the covers that they had. Here's for 172, for 72, for 73, 74, 75, 76, 77. Yeah, this is familiar to people who saw Hulk versus Wolverine. They adapted loosely for this imagery for that movie. Yeah, that's something interesting about the movie. A lot of people like is the imagery they use in the movie. Where people, if you're a horror comic, you can easily point out though where the inspiration from. Now, I have heard on Rob Liefeld podcast. Yeah, I keep referencing his podcast. I'm sorry, because I've been listening to it. Apparently, the guy who actually did the animation of the movie is a friend of his, and he showed it to him and another friend of his at his house, a private screening. And the reason why he did this was because Liefeld got him started in the comic industry. And apparently, according to Liefeld, some people working in the Marvel movies aren't the people he helped basically bring in. They may have been successful in the Marvel industry due to Wizard, but they've been successful in animation. And the guy basically put Deadpool in as a thank you to Rob Liefeld for giving him his first job in the comic industry. So, yeah. We have 78, 79, which is kind of all the same cover to use for this one here. I'm not sure why they chose that cover for. We have 80, 81, 82, 83, and a two-page thing for 84. Now, here's the thing about this storyline. Did you know this storyline, despite the fact it's roughly a 13-part story, did you know the storyline came out in half that time? You're thinking, how is that possible for an ongoing series Marvel? And some people think it's a recent phenomenon Marvel did this. Well, you know how nowadays some titles get released like 2 a month? This book did it in its entire existence. I'm not talking about the story itself. I'm talking about Marvel Comics Presents, the original ongoing series that lasted for 175 issues. Its entire run, it came out once every 2 weeks. It was a bi-weekly title, and I've now reviewed some of the stories in that book. I reviewed the Colossus story for that one. I believe you reviewed the Black Panther one. Now, of course, talking about Weapon X. Now, here's the strange thing about Marvel Comics Presents. Did you know Wolverine had the most amount of stories while pushing that series out of any character appearing in that book? He appeared at one point for 100 straight issues. Originally did the first 10 issues, and then he left for a while, and they did 100 straight issues. Despite the fact he had an ongoing series at a point in time. And then you think, okay, when they came out with Volume 2, did they feature that book? Nope. They did it for Volume 3. Yes, they did it for that one. Now, what exactly happened with our next program? Wolverine gets captured, gets basically turned into a killer via brainwashing and put this thing on his head, which, here's a fun fact. Did you know this helmet actually has appeared in live action? You're thinking, which movie featured it? X-Men Apocalypse. Yes, where they went to Acolyte Lake facility. And Jean Grey finds Wolverine, who is thin and wearing shorts. Now, in most depictions of this story, usually when they show Wolverine, now I think they also loosely have this for the X-Men animated series, when you pick up the Weapon X program, usually he's picked as either he's shown naked or he's wearing a pair of, let's say, Speedos. In X-Apocalypse, he's wearing boxers. I'm not kidding about that. He wears boxers. Now, basically, what he was programmed to do, he was programmed to be a killer. And eventually, several times in the story, he tried to break out. And then he eventually succeeded. Now, him being horrified at his claws in the movie, that's kind of true, but not in the case of X-Men's Wolverine for some reason, where he's got no problem with the claws, and yet in the previous flashback, they have him horrified about it. And here, and by the way, him showing the fact that he's bleeding because it's shown basically he's bleeding on the cover, that is something that they did bring that concept to the X2 movie, where he is shown bleeding from his own hands because the claws popping out. That is pulled from this very story. That part of the Wolverine's backstory in the Weapon X program, that has always been there. But this is the story where it started off. And he wears his device in his head for a while, and then eventually gets removed. After he removes himself, and he breaks out, and he basically wanders for a while. I think until he's found by, get this, the couple that became the Guardian. He was found by the Hudsons. You're thinking, the Hudsons? James and Heather Hudson, a.k.a. the Guardian and Vindicator of Alpha Flight. Yep, that is who he was found by in this particular story. That's what he was found afterwards. But not shown here per se, but this story is a classic Wolverine story. And I do recommend people fans of Wolverine to check. If you've never read the story, check the story out because it is so good. Now, it's not terrible. It's really, really good. I give this book a 10 out of 10. If you want to go into detail exactly what Barry Winsor basically had a problem with, I had kind of heard it was due to the fact people were copying his work. And also, Jerk Comics did the whole thing with Barry Winsor about it. But that's something else. Next up is another book that features Wolverine. We have Midnight Suns, which, here's the thing with this book. This book was released as a promotional tie-in to the video game. Excuse me. Except this book is set in 616. Yep. Set in 616. Now, the book is written by Ethan Stacks, who is currently the writer of Bounty Hunters. Yes. I'm glad, in fact, Mark picked a good writer to write this. Now, as you see in the cover, you have Blade, you have Illyana, aka Magic, you have Wolverine, you have Nico, that's Zoe from the pages of Strange Academy. This woman here, now, a friend of mine thought this was Robbie Reyes. I had to correct him. He's like, oh, that's what the character is. This character is from Doctor Strange and the Sorcerer Supreme. It's an American ghostwriter who just happens to be a Sorcerer Supreme. Oh, one thing also cool with this book, if you ever see the original covers for this thing, that on the covers themselves, they actually had the old Midnight Suns logo from the 90s in the cover, which I thought was so cool. Now, and by the way, they also put on these armor around issue 4. Basically, it's called Rise Midnight Suns. And the way this book kind of depicts it is that, oh, this is the first time ever they've ever appeared, despite the fact they first appeared in the 90s. I mean, look at the logo. It's pretty much the same logo they used from the original imprint from the 90s. It's like the same exact logo, except the only difference is that instead of an O, it's a U. But virtually, it's the same group. Now, Blade was part of that original group, but my only guess is the reason we add these other characters because the fact that here's the strange thing about this book. Now, 3 of these characters have been around for a long time. Illyana made a debut in the 70s. Basically, these 3 characters on the left of the cover, all in the 70s. 2000s, I think it was 2020, her, 2010s. So I'd say of all these characters, Zoe here is one around the shortest period of time. And you might be thinking, who's probably the longest of all these characters? I'd say it's probably Blade, per se, because he first appeared in Tomb of Dracula number 7. And they're mostly put, basically, these people are basically brought together. Now, we also see Wong, you guys mentioned Wong, Doctor Doom, Clea. They also still bring up the fact Doctor Strange is no longer alive during this miniseries. There's a reference to his death. Which, of course, I don't mind them occasionally mentioning it. because he was dead for over a year. Yeah, he was dead for like 1 year exactly, and then he came back. Though he was dead he went back very quickly. Now the artwork in this book, for the first 5 issues, all 5 issues done by Luigi Zagaria, with the co-artwork now by Alberto Fricci, issues 3 and 5. Mostly put now. Here's the this cover here. This actually is the original cover. The first cover is this here. This is a variant cover. I think it's kind of weird the fact for a trade paperback to put the variant cover for the main cover. Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird. I know put the variant covers in the back, but mostly you have these people just brought together to deal with this magical threat. Now, of these characters, you think Wolverine? You think he wouldn't deal with magical threats? Oh, he has. Don't worry, he has. He has dealt with magic a lot of the time he exists in comics. Even though he's more of a grounded reality character with the exception of his powers, he has dealt with magical stuff before. One of his closest friends is the freaking Ghost Rider. Well, he's worked with Dan Ketch. So we start off with the Strange Academy, where Agatha Harkness is there as teacher. And we have substitution for his class. We have Blade, Nico, and Magic, who's wearing this look for some reason. You could say this book is like basically a spin-off book of Strange Academy, because that's kind of what this book is. It's like the characters from Strange Academy and a few other books, and just combine them together. We also have in this book, let's see, what's her name here? Yeah, Zoe's brought here. Basically, they're just random. Now, the thing with this Native American character, who's here in the book, she was left in the present. She chose not to turn on time for some reason. So, we have these people getting kidnapped, and by the way, we also have Zelma, who, if you've forgotten this character, I would not be surprised, because here's the thing. She was heavily featured when Jason Aaron wrote Doctor Strange. And once he pretty much wrapped up as around that book, she became an afterthought by other writers. She basically was never featured. I think she was featured like 2 or 3 times. And then Bertrand Ramos and Scotty Young brought this character back and made her a primary character on pages of Strange Academy. So, and by the way, you have she's called the Spirit Rider. Yeah, and she's also a Sorcerer Supreme. Yeah, riding her, basically her version of motorcycle, and Wolverine just ran. Yeah, he feels like, you read the story, that's something he has in Magic before. He's like the most random addition to the whole book. But some people could also see it that Wolverine was probably out of the book, because if you think about it, if all these characters, now I get maybe Ileana because, well, magic, obviously. Wolverine feels the most random in this whole book, but my only guess is the reason he was included, because if you look at this cover, people know who Wolverine is. People probably know who Blade is. Ileana because of X-Men and stuff, but the other characters, Nico, they might know who she is because of Runaways, fine, but Zoe, who's here in the back, people have no idea who this character is because she's a very recent character. As for Spirit Rider, well, she's also fairly recent too, so those two are probably not recognizable, but I think Wolverine is merely put there for just so the book can sell. I'm sure the book probably did, per se. And then they use some time, they show young version of Agatha, which, I gotta say, this young version of Agatha is a very beautiful woman. Apparently from, oh my gosh, from Wundagore Mountain, which is the home of High Evolutionary. Yes. So, we deal with this spiritual threat, and just happens to involve Doctor Doom for some reason. And then, of course, you have magical creatures. Then, toward the end of the book, to get the armor you see in the back of the book. My guess they probably included that because it's probably going to be in the video game. Though a friend of mine, I think, has been playing it. A couple of people have. If you look at Wolverine's costume here, it reminds me a lot of his X-Force costume. Yes, seriously. Blades look like his outfit didn't change all that much. Let me show up the outfit in particular, because it pops at the end of issue 4. Yes, issue 4. Because look at these armors. Spirit Raider's armor, like, look at her armor in particular. Her armor reminds me of the King in Black. No, seriously, that's what it reminds me of. Now, Ilion, is it just me, or is it because she's an adult, lets us over midriff, in any outfit she wears? Yeah, also, is it just me, or is that Agatha Harkness, the young version? She kind of reminds me a little bit, I'd say, mostly in the body type. It's like they took the body of Elizabeth Olsen, gave her maybe the face of the actress plays on the Agatha a WandaVision. In the case Nico, you could say their outfit reminds, like, I'm not sure. They look at Blade, for example. He looked like he has the least amount of change. Wolverine, obviously, X-Force. I do love the red. It's so awesome. Now, also the red and black thing. It reminds me a lot of basically Venom was on Thunderbolts, where he changed the White Skull to black from white to red. Yep. And then we have Valator, one of the villains of this book. He looks like Pyramid Head from Silent Hill. Like, if you played Silent Hill, you probably know what I'm talking about. I personally have not played Silent Hill, but I know what Silent Hill is because I've seen walkthroughs. But it looks like Pyramid Head. Yes, but it's like a Pyramid Head who could talk. Yeah, this is just a really fun miniseries, and I do recommend people fans of any magical stuff for Marvel Comics. What I recommend is the Wolverine fans. Check it out for Wolverine fans. I would mainly focus on people. I would mainly recommend this people to check this out if you're a fan of the magical side of Marvel Universe. This book does give you, and also if you're curious about the video game itself, like if you've played a video game, you're curious about this title, check it out. Is it an adaptation of the game? No. Why, you might ask? Because it said 616. That's most of the reason for it. Yeah. But in the case of Blade, now, here's the thing. In case you're wondering, when did this miniseries come out? It was like fairly recently. It came out roughly just this year. Let me look up on here. Because the trade itself was just released fairly recently. Excuse me. Now, in case you're curious, though, for the original book group, did they have a series called Midnight Suns? Yes, except it was a an anthology book, and it lasted like 9 issues. Yeah, it only lasted about 9 issues before the book was canceled, presumably due to low sales. I think it was released like once every quarter. Yeah, and one of the issues, I believe was issue 4, was actually part of the final crossover featuring the Midnight Suns. I think it was like Siege of Darkness. That was the third and last crossover they had. And it was the biggest one they ever had. It involved like all the titles. It was a lot bigger than the previous one. Now there's been a few of them, like even like okay. So it started in September of last year. That's when the first issue came out. The final issue actually came out just this past January. So basically, yeah, fairly recent. Now, do the team have a name? No. This title will be called Midnight Suns. They're never referred to that by that name. Not really, no. Isn't it quite weird? A book called Midnight Suns, and yet the team itself is never referred to as that. And we were thinking, did in the final issue they finally give a name? Nope, never did. You know, for some reason, they usually, when she's depicted, she's as an old lady. For some reason, they decide to have her changed to be, like, much younger. Yeah, basically, after the events of this book, basically, she disappeared. My only guess is the reason why they changed the look. It's because of WandaVision. Yeah. I don't have an issue with that. As long as the face doesn't match the actual original actress. It's not a problem with me. Yep. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this particular review. So tomorrow, basically, a few One Piece videos. One particular for the manga. The other one's for like the dub stuff, which I've only got about 16 episodes left to go. And also reviews for Demon Slayer. Now, no Black Clover yet because book has not been. The manga is still on hiatus, so these one we should expect tomorrow. One Piece, Demon Slayer, My Hero Academia, Eden Zero, Case Closed, and maybe Comic Corner 2. Okay, next video tomorrow.